Where are all my friends? Sitting down with Loren Wells.
What's up?
Now, this has been a really fun experience for me doing the whole podcast thing. I've had the chance to meet a lot of new people, hear new stories, but in this case, you are a longtime friend.
That's right.
And you are the first music attorney that I've had on the podcast. And this is a big deal to me.
Yeah.
Because out of all of the professionals that I've had the chance to work with, you love your craft. You are so good at your craft. I have so much fun talking to you. The amount of hours we've spent on the phone where you'll just like dig in and explain to me the most intricate royalty point or something like that. Like, I just feel like you truly care. That's everything I want on this podcast. And I'm excited to hear more of your story. I know bits of it, but like this episode to me, I'm so hyped. So
I'm excited to be here, man.
Thank you for being here. You're here because of the Grammys. You've had an incredible year.
That's right.
You have a lot of your clients that are nominated. So it's a really cool reason for you to be in LA.
We've got two.
Oh, is it two?
It's just two, but it's a total of four Grammys between the two of them.
I see. Okay. You were telling me, as you were telling me, I was like, wait, no, there's more than two.
No, just the two. No, 2019 coming into 2020 has been just a really interesting process. And, when you do something like, whether you're a manager, whether you're an agent, whether you're a lawyer, you have to put in a lot of time. You have to put in a lot of time of doing a lot of stuff where you don't necessarily see the results immediately. And you have to just expect that down the line, you're going to see those. And I said this a long time ago. I've been saying this for a decade. It's all about the long game. Yeah. It's just all about doing the good work with the good people. Yeah. And in the long term, if you keep doing that, if you're good at it, you're smart at it, you work hard at it, it's just time or luck. Yeah. Or a little bit of both. And so, I've been at this for a bit. You know that. I've known you for a minute. In the last 18 months, has really been a really exciting time for us, just across the board. Not just the Grammys, but just all the different work that we do. We've really been seeing a lot of the fruits of the efforts.
Yeah, dude.
Fantastic.
Well, like, that's the exact thing is, like, you've always been the same person. You've always had that same work ethic, but the amount of pieces that have clicked and just have come together recently, it's like, it feels exciting from afar. So I think that this is the perfect time to sit down and do this podcast. So before we get into any type of like your beginning days, for anybody who doesn't know you, or just to paint the picture of like what you've been up to, like tell me a couple of your clients. Like, obviously you have to keep a balance.
Right,
you can't say too much, but tell me some of the things that you're excited about. Tell me some of like the bigger clients that you've been able to work with, or just anything, like paint that picture of right now.
Yeah, no, I feel like I'm very lucky that the firm that I work at, there's just three of us. We're all very close, and we have a very diverse roster, and we represent everything from the estate of Chuck Berry, who is, as John Lennon said, if there was another word for rock and roll, it's Chuck Berry. And we've been able to be involved in that estate since before it was an estate, when he was alive. We got to be the attorneys who worked his final record, the last record he put out before he died, his first record in 40 years, that, was just, really universally acclaimed. And, we've got to do that. At the same time, from the legacy stuff, we get to work with contemporary artists. My guy, Trevor Daniel, is just absolutely exploding right now. I've been with him for almost 2 years, seeing him from the very beginnings to now being number 75 in the world on Spotify, which is really unreal. And it's amazing to see that sort of stuff happen. But, and everything, our Grammy nominees this year are Tank and the Bangas and Best New Artist. And we've got PJ Morton for 4 different categories, including Best R&B Album, which I think that he actually has a real shot at. And then where I know you from is, I came up in punk rock. We'll get to this later on, but I always say I came up in punk rock first as a teenager, figuring out who I was, and then second as a lawyer, figuring out who I was. And both times it was really punk rock that like helped me find that path. And so, as you know, I work with a lot of artists in that world. Silverstein, Citizen, like Moss to Flames, The Contortionist, stuff from the little artists to the big legacies. I'm really, I don't want to sound cheesy, but as you know, I'm a pretty cheesy dude, and I feel very lucky to be a part of their paths, whether it's someone like Silverstein, where, getting to work on this new record for them, which I think is going to be phenomenal.
It's cool. Like, you really do have that passion. And also another genre that you didn't touch on too much, but you helped me with a lot of the stuff with version 3. I know you represent Gucci High Waters.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, you work in a lot of different genres.
Oh, I mean, I should get into that. I mean, we do country too. I've got a songwriter out in Nashville who's written singles for Jake Owens, Eli Young Band, Morgan Waller, Florida Georgia Line. We've got everything. I've got one of my hip hop producers has a quadruple platinum hit. It's interesting. Like I said, I feel like the diversity of the genres is really what makes it exciting. I can work on something that's a legacy. That's something that's like a Chuck Berry. I can work on I've got a client, CU Space Cowboy. This really kind of crazy off-time hardcore band. That's just kind of coming up in that world. And the fact that in one day I can simultaneously be having to deal with Universal for a legacy estate and then dealing with Pure Noise for, a crazy hardcore band, that's what makes this so much fun. And that's, I'm a super lucky dude.
Yeah. And I think that like the underlying piece out of all of the music you work in is it's things you care about. Like I've never seen you be too cool for like a certain genre or a certain artist. It's like if it's passion, if you feel something there, you're excited to take it on. So to be able to speak with somebody in your field that has this much of a diverse understanding and knowledge to me is like so perfect for this.
Yeah, and I will say this, like, one of the things I love about having all the different genres is, working with all the different genres is what you see is that there's these certain kernels that exist among all artists. Whatever genre they are, there's this certain passion that they have. And there's a way that as a member of the team, you can just really get behind it, even if it's a genre you don't care about, even if it's a genre you don't like. I mean, when I listen to music on my own time, I listen to like Philip Glass and like minimalist stuff, like my own personal tastes are pretty out there at this point, but I can get behind anything because you see them, you see the way that they love what they do. And to be a part of that, again, I'm a cheesy dude. And to just play a role in these artists' lives and their artistic experience, to be able to help guide them in the right way to make sure that they are, at least taken care of, that they're not getting themselves in bad situations. And I'm one of those lawyers that when I get really into it, I'm on the strategy calls. I'm trying to figure out how can we, make this record the best record that it can be, from a business perspective, not from an aesthetic perspective. I'm not going to tell you to rewrite a chorus or something like that, even though sometimes I think you should. I'm not going to tell you to.
Well, that's amazing. So now we've explained kind of like who you are and really like that part of it. This part is fun for me because I want to hear where this all comes from and like your early days of finding just all of these different things that you've done, because it's not like you started as a music attorney. You've had so many different things. So how did you get to here?
It's funny. It's one of those questions that's impossible to answer without taking up our entire time.
Yeah, I know. It's a tricky one.
Because, it starts in, it certainly starts in the punk rock world in the 90s. I grew up in Central Illinois, small town. What's wonderful about punk rock in small towns is you end up knowing everyone in the nearby town. So your punk rock scene isn't this little town that you live in. So I grew up in a town called Normal, Illinois.
It was actually called Normal.
It's called Normal, Illinois. Yeah.
Incredible.
Which I will say, the one funny joke about Normal, Illinois is if you don't know there's a Normal, Illinois, and you're like driving past it, and a cop will pass you, and on the side it will say Normal Police, and you'll just be like, what's the next one is like the weird police, like the upside down police, the like, what other kind of police are there? What kind of police do they have in this town? But like, so in Normal, Illinois, we had our little scene, we had our punk bands, but there was Clinton, Illinois nearby. There was Lincoln, Illinois. There was Springfield. There was Morton. There was Macomb. There was Peoria. And there was just this whole vibrant scene of people in all different walks of life, from all different backgrounds, all these different towns, and you'd have these shows together, and you'd learn how to make things happen. You wanted to see a band; they're not going to come play Macomb, Illinois, so you had to throw the show. Yeah, and it's actually something that I will say as a bit of an aside. It's a reason why in the music industry you see at all levels, in all genres, there's people who grew up in punk rock and grew up in the DIY world. It's because you get used to having to make the things happen that you want to see happen, and once you joined the music industry on the business side. I say there's like talent and industry side. Once you join on the industry side, it's all about making things happen. Yeah. And when you've had this history of doing that from these like no corn towns or wherever, it builds who you are. And then that's why it's like I am still in many ways that same kid who, was so eager to bring down Baxter from Chicago to come play in Normal, Illinois, not knowing that Tim McGilrath would go on to front Rise Against and become this huge rock star. Now, I mean, I'm still that same kid.
He was in a band called Baxter.
Yeah,
first?
Baxter was actually. So it's funny. It's like Baxter was like my favorite band in high school.
That's amazing.
They were the band that like kind of opened my eyes to the limits of what punk rock could be. It wasn't just power chords and snotty vocals. It could be undistorted parts. It could be screaming parts. It could be whining parts. It could be really unique. Actually, when Rise Against first came out, I hated them.
Because you were like, this isn't Baxter.
Because it wasn't Baxter.
That's funny.
It was nowhere near Baxter.
So at what age did you really find music?
13.
13.
Yeah, and I can tell you the moment I found music.
Please, yes.
It was 120 minutes, the show on MTV, and it was Green Day Longview, the single Longview. I remember just staying up late with my sister and watching it, and that video came on. And this was at a time when alternative rock was a thing. You know, there was Nirvana, there was Pearl Jam, there was Smashing Pumpkins, but there was something about Green Day and the way that Billy Joe sneered when he sang that just was different. And I connected to that. I got so into them, and I was on, this is AOL days, I was in this AOL chat room, and someone said, hey, you know, if you really like Green Day, there's these singles that you can buy that have songs that are not on the album. And the idea of hearing a new Green Day song was so mind-boggling to me. So I went to the record store that was in downtown Normal. It was an indie store. And I go to them, I say, I hear that there are Green Day singles that have songs that I've never heard before. And he's like, not only that, did you know that there's 2 other albums? So he takes me to the section and shows me their first 2 records. And I blew my mind. I go home and I listen to them. I just become obsessed with Green Day. And I just go back a week later and I say, hey, these albums are on this label called Lookout Records. Are there any other bands on that label? And the dude was like, absolutely there are. He took me to Avail, their record Dixie. He showed me Screeching Weasel. And literally because of that, I realized that I didn't have to care about all those things I had been pretending to care about. Sports, TV. I didn't care about those. I suddenly had this thing. Yeah. And what's funny is I don't know that guy's name at the record store. Yeah. I have no idea who he is. He has no idea that he literally changed my life.
Isn't that fucking crazy?
It is.
Isn't that nuts that those moments, because it's like so fast. I was like, so when did you find music? And you knew. Yeah. And that guy and that, like, that's just so crazy to me, because I think that all of the realest people in this know those moments. And it's just, for certain people, they'll go to the record store, they'll get an album and they'll be like, cool, thanks. And that's it. Don't think about it. And then the other people, it's like, this is everything.
Absolutely.
So I'm obsessed with hearing those moments.
Yeah. And from that on, it's just like, I realized I didn't have to pretend to care about the other stuff. I also, I had been a really shy, awkward, nerdy kid.
Yeah.
I came from a very academic family in a town that was, frankly, pretty white trash. My block was, we weren't very well off as a family. We were in a neighborhood that was like scared of a lot of the kids in my block,
Whoa, yeah.
And it was, but I was a really uncomfortable kid. And, punk rock was literally the thing. I think a lot of people have this story that was like, oh shit, I can just be a weirdo and I can have my people. Like, I can have my world. And so then you discover those people. And then that's what I'm saying when I'm talking about all those towns nearby. Suddenly, it's not just the kids at your high school. It's now you're part of a local scene. Okay, now it's not just a local scene. Now it's a regional scene. Next thing you know, you're playing shows in all those towns. You get to know all those bands. It just becomes, it becomes so important so quickly.
Dude,
I think it's true of all genres.
So well. Like, to me, like, I draw such a parallel, because it was like, even though I had my different ways of finding it, it was like being that kid that didn't feel like you fit in. And then you go to a show, you find these kids that you get along with, you find out there's other shows, there's other music. And then all of a sudden the other stuff doesn't matter. And you find your people in a community, and like whatever that is, like, it's just amazing.
Dude, I'll say what I've learned in my career now, working with people from all different types of genres, is that experience is not specific to punk rock.
No.
That experience is true of hip hop kids.
Yeah.
That experience is true of jazz nerds. That experience is true of everybody.
That's the thing.
You find your people and you're just like, there we go.
Yeah. And we were talking about this before the podcast started, and I feel like it's just a funny parallel. We'll get into it later, but it's like how genres are evolving so much now, and it doesn't have to be specific genres. It's like, to me, again, that's so cool. And of course, it doesn't matter what genre. It's like the community is what matters. It's these people, that's that feeling when you find it and find out there's other people there. Damn it, that's good.
Yeah, and I want, for people who are making music now, who are in their 20s, in their teens now, I don't want them to take for granted the fact that they exist in a world, like you just said, where genres are not so finely defined like they were. And the one negative side of this story about punk rock was that back then, it was punk rock and that was it. You didn't get to pick other stuff. You couldn't like punk rock and then also like even a grunge song. Like the story that I always say is, like, when I was in 8th grade, when I picked punk rock, there was this girl whose last name also started with a W. Her locker was next to me, and she picked grunge. And we had been friends. And I remember when Kurt Cobain died, and there had been this rift between us because she was now grunge and I was punk rock. And I remember kind of saying, should I console? She was crying. I was like, should I even console her? And in retrospect,
that's
the
insane.
idea that like the genres were so harshly defined, that she picked grunge, I picked punk, that she picked grunge, I picked punk, and then therefore there was now this like rift between us. That's something that kids, they don't have to deal with, because you can listen to any genre of music at any point in time. Just put it in Spotify, put it in YouTube Music, whatever it is you listen to. I still listen to Pandora because I'm an old dude. Like you can listen to whatever you want. And that was just something that we didn't have. And so there's negatives to some of these things. Like the punk rock world was so wonderful for me, but it was also somewhat exclusive in some respects, and it's good for us, I think, as we get older to recognize those things and to like take those memories and remember the positive, but also reconcile the negative.
Totally. And make something better for the next wave.
Absolutely. Which I think, today's kids, they don't have to worry about as much.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. So you find music then, and then you get to a point where way before law, you're playing in bands, right?
Yeah. I mean, my 90s experience, I went through the 90s genre by genre. Like I started out in pop punk, in the mid 90s with the Screeching Weasel and Riverdales and, that sort of stuff. And then when emo, the Midwestern emo came out, like, American football opened up for my high school band because we were high school kids that had a lot of fans. So, I
can't believe that was just said out loud. Yeah. That's unreal.
Yeah, and it's funny, the emo thing, and then late 90s hardcore, like I got into that I was straight edge at the time and vegan. And again, a lot of this notice is finding your place. Totally. And finding your community. And I think I struggled a lot back then. Even in the punk rock world, I still felt a little bit like an outsider. And so a lot of it was trying to find that place. But my 90s experience, literally it's pop punk into emo, into hardcore. Now, all before any of it was big. So like, in 1999, I was playing, I was in one of those hardcore bands in Central Illinois that played with every single hardcore band of note of the era. But we didn't know about the industry. We didn't know about how to become a part of what these bands were a part of. Yeah. So I got to play with every single one of them in all the different towns in Central Illinois, but never got to make an actual name for ourselves. Yeah. That took much longer for me to figure out. That's why I get so jealous of people like you, frankly, that like figure out how to do things practically at a younger age, because I for a long time just lived in this bubble of playing these shows, but not really making any effort to be a part of the industry writ large.
Well, what you just said to me there, like the way you said that kind of messed me up, because I get it. Like you can go through all the same motions. You can be great at what you do, but you do have to have this awareness of the industry depending on what your goals are.
Right.
But like, as you start to understand that, as you start to meet people, you can kind of have a very different experience in life and career, because if you don't, you will kind of just go through the motions and play the local shows.
Yeah. And
that's what you did.
And we were one of those bands. I was always in those bands that would be big in our hometown. And the touring bands would come through and be like, "You guys are sick. This is amazing. Send us your demo." But then we didn't know how to get a good demo. So we'd be like, "Oh, they said send us a demo." We'd go and pay some shithead, $500 to record 13 songs in a day. Yeah, we'd send it to them and never hear back from them.
Of course, yeah.
And it's just, it's I don't know, it's one of those things. To some extent, I think it's better that I didn't figure it out then. I think my life now is great. And I cherish the 25 years that I have been, whether I was peeking over the fence and looking into the music industry's backyard, eventually I moved up to Chicago, tried to be a rock star, got to, work with the big lawyers and the big managers at the time and do that sort of stuff. But, I look back on my 25 years of doing this, and now I don't regret any of it. Like I love and to be honest, and my wife kind of criticizes me for this sometimes, that I romanticize the failures. Yeah. Because I cherish those failures, to be honest, I do.
Well, it's crazy you say that, because I think about that, and it's maybe you have so much genuine excitement about what you do now. What if you had so much success early? Maybe you'd be jaded by the fact that you did have so many failures. Now that things are getting better, you understand it. You can look back and be like, wow, I learned so much in those failures. And again, one of the coolest parts of this podcast and hearing those stories is that perspective from people who are accomplished now and can say that, I feel like is gas for the people that are grinding in it right now and don't know what happens next. Like that's encouraging to be like, yo, yeah, cool. I'm stoked that I failed for all this long because it got me to where I'm at now.
No, I always like to remind people that, people that I know who are oftentimes in their mid 20s, but much more aspirational than I was at that age. Back then, I just wanted to play shows. I didn't know how it happened. I always like to tell people that, I started my law practice at the age of 30. With 0 clients, 3 contacts in the music industry, and no revenue. That was at the age of 30. So it's like, it took me so long to figure that out, and you don't have to know what you're going to do. I would say your 20s is your time to go be broke and try stupid shit, and maybe you'll succeed, and that's great. But if you don't, that's okay. like now at 38 with 2 kids and a mortgage, like now if I fail, all right, well now my life's fucked. I always say
maybe
like
it's a little worse.
Your 20s is the time to get your heart broken and to fuck up. Yeah. Because now at my age, if I get my heart broken, that means I'm getting divorced. That means I'm gonna have to fight over kids. If I fuck up, that means like my life is,
you have 2 little beings that rely on you for food.
Luckily,
that's different.
I had a long time of getting my heart broken and fucking up. And and I love those memories.
That's awesome. So then tell me, at what point do you start finding law, and where do you start studying that, and how does that transition?
So again, these are a lot. I have like straight up, I remember the exact moments for a lot of these things.
I love that.
So, law was not something I ever fathomed. I don't have any rich relatives. Like I don't have any lawyers that I'm related to. I'm not related to any doctors. I am the only lawyer that I know of in my extended family. I mean, as far as I know in my family, I'm the only one. I think that's still true. I've been saying that since I've been a lawyer. It's been about 10 years. So maybe there's someone out there I don't remember.
If there's any other Wellses, hit us up, correct us.
Sorry, Wellses, Graysdorfs, Lippmans, whatever. I'm sorry if you're lawyers. But I was in a band in Chicago, and it had one of those perfect names to be able to tell the story later on and have it work perfectly. It was called One Life. So I got to put one life behind and start another, things like that. But it was called One Life, and it was a band that I had been playing in punk rock and in hardcore, but I was this really ridiculous performer, like spin kicking off the bass drum, and like I was one of those dudes, that like I was a guitar.
Living it.
Yeah. I was crazy. Like I used to be when I was a singer in a hardcore band, like I would punch my mouth until it bled. Like I was crazy, dude. I've had a fun life, man. I also did stand-up comedy and shit. It's been fun.
What? You tried stand-up?
Yeah. No, that's a whole other podcast, I guess. Part 2. I'll come back for that one. That'll be a short podcast because it didn't last long and I didn't have any success at it. But that's not true. I had some success at it. But but no, I mean, I was this kid, and so like I became this guy that like people from Chicago bands would come down and play with my college band, which was early 2000s, but like this really interesting mix of technical hardcore. But what we did, because that was when Dillinger Escape Plan was first starting out, when Botch was around, when Norma Jean was around. Cool. Every Time I Die's first record, Burial Plot, Bidding War, was like something that blew my mind. But we heard all these, these discordant, off-time hardcore bands and did the melodic version of that. And which still, frankly, hasn't been done. A little bit-ish. Like when Thrice came out, we're kind of like, that kind of touches on what we're doing, but that was way more poppy. And so we were one of those bands that like, I became someone that people in like the Chicago scene knew, because they'd come down and they'd play with our band, and I'd be the dude fucking spin kicking off the bass drum and like kicking the audience and shit. And so when I moved to Chicago, I went to one party and I got roped into being this pop rock band that had a manager, had a lawyer, I had friends that were suddenly signing to major record labels. You were
starting to see
it. And our scene, I mean, this was the world where the Plain White T's came out of, and at the time with Lucky Boys Confusion was one of the big local bands.
Oh my God, I love that band.
Yeah, Fall Out Boy was out of that scene. June. I'm trying to think of all the bands we knew. The Academy Is.
Did you cross paths with Minardi at that time or no?
Well, so interesting fact. Johnny Minardi's record label, what is it?
LLR,
Little League Records. We were the one band that turned him down. Sorry, Johnny.
That's awesome.
Actually, I don't know why I would apologize to Johnny. The band should be apologizing to me for that.
Oh my God.
Because I was like, record deal, let's do it, even if it's some kid in the suburbs. But we thought we were hot shit, and we had a manager who had recently been fired from Slipknot. That was her claim to fame. But we had a lawyer, and it was just kind of like, he kind of talked to me one night. I had this tendency. I had been straight edge for a long time, and so when I joined this pop rock band, I was like, sure, I'll do the drinking thing. And, I'd get drunk and like go to the computer and like research shit, at the party. And like the band would all make fun of me. And the lawyer just came up to me one time. He was like, you're just like, it's kind of like different than these guys, just like something that's a little bit different about you. And I remember just talking to him about what it was like to be a lawyer, what the role of a music lawyer was. It's kind of placed that initial kernel in my head of something that I could do. What really made it happen was my first date with my now wife. I made the mistake of telling her I was planning to go to law school, which she never let me forget. And so eventually I ended up going to law school because she was like, remember that thing you said on our first date? Well, let's make that happen. And, I was just saying it's a long, windy path, because then I went to law school thinking I was getting out of the music thing. I'd failed at it my whole life. I'd never succeeded at it. And so I thought I was getting out.
Well, never succeeded on a certain level, but clearly like you had you had the look. You had been in all the bands. You had done a lot of it.
I'd always been a big fish in a small pond, but it wasn't even a small pond. Like it was a puddle left after the rain.
I see.
Like, Normal Illinois.
Yeah.
That's not even a pond.
Yeah.
You know what I
yeah.
mean? So
then law school, you thought you were getting out of it.
I thought I was getting out of it. What had happened was my, longtime best friend, the kid that I had written music with when we were 13, that we'd, broken into his father's liquor cabinet and gotten drunk and cried about getting our hearts broken.
Perfect.
The guy I got into emo with in the 90s.
Amazing. I like this person.
He didn't quit. He didn't really, to be honest, he didn't really have other options, but he didn't quit. And he was in a band in Chicago that started to get a lot of attention.
Oh, cool.
And they had Atlantic Records fly out to see them play. And the A&R, who I still know, she straight up went up to him and said, "Look, I actually think you're great. I'm not into your band. If you get a new band that's around you, I can give you some money to put some demos together, and we'll have first refusal on it. But we can figure some stuff out here." And I was in law school, and it was the summer after my first year. And frankly, I was terrified of the idea of having to be a lawyer because I didn't want to go to court. I didn't really know what lawyers did. I ended up basically in law school through, I don't know, through basically a promise to my wife, who wasn't my wife at the time. But he called me up and said, "Hey, I've got this opportunity. I just remember writing songs. It'd been a few years since we'd worked together. I need you on this." And so the summer after my first year in law school, I spent it up in Chicago writing songs with my best friend. We recorded the songs. We didn't get the deal from the songs, but the label, we kept in touch with them. They referred us to a lawyer who happened to be based in St. Louis, where I was going to law school. So then I got the opportunity to intern for him while I was going through the process as an artist, which gave me, I always say, and I won't say who he is. We very rocky history with this guy. But the one thing that he did above all else was just show me that it was possible to work in the music industry, even in the path that I was going down, like that. Even because the guy who had been the lawyer of my old band wasn't like a real deal fucking music lawyer.
I see. Yeah.
And this guy was.
Yeah.
And so he showed me that. And so while I was in law school, I got to do that. I got to simultaneously, play rock shows, showcase for the majors and the stuff that you want to do when you're those artists, and then also intern for someone who was doing the deals.
Yeah.
And so it showed me that it was a thing.
That's a really cool series of events to happen.
Yeah.
And was that connected enough of a piece where you're like, okay, cool, I can do this law thing, and like here's where I do fit in? And
I think it was a real moment that I realized it was possible, but I still didn't know how to get there.
Yeah.
I still didn't know how to start.
Yeah.
And so I did what I'd like to say what everyone does, but I think what almost no one does. And I just did some really weird shit. And I was like, okay, well, I want to be in the music industry. I want to be able to do this stuff. How do I stand out? How would I make myself different from other people? I figured that was what I had to do. Yeah. I had to be different from all the other people trying to do the same thing I'm trying to do. And so I came up with this idea of creating what is still the world's largest database of music industry related lawsuits called the Discography Legal Encyclopedia of Popular Music.
I think I remember you telling me about this.
Yeah, it's funny.
When we first met, you were like, yeah, I did this big crazy thing. And I was like, damn.
Yeah, well, at a point in my life, it was a huge part of who I was and what my story was. I've done so much since then that now I often will forget about it or will glance over it when I'm talking about what I've done. But I mean, I just, in my spare time, in between going to law school at Washington University in St. Louis, I was an articles editor on the Law Review.
Yeah.
I was driving back and forth from Chicago and St. Louis, every weekend trying to, be a rock star. And in my quote unquote spare time that I somehow managed to find, I just started looking up. I grabbed a Rolling Stone Encyclopedia of Rock and Roll. And I realized if I wanted to work in the music business, I had to know all the genres I knew nothing about. And I read it cover to cover. And then noticed about halfway through there was a lot of lawsuits in it, and I was like, I should look those things up. I should find out like what if those lawsuits exist in the databases that I now have access to because I'm a law student.
Yeah.
And so I finished it the first time, then I went through it a second time, and I found all the lawsuits and looked them up. When I looked them up, I'd say, well, I wouldn't find that one.
Yeah.
But so I look up the Rolling Stones. I wouldn't find the one that was referenced in the encyclopedia, but I'd find 10 more. And so I started making this spreadsheet of like, okay, what are all the different lawsuits? And so then what I ended up doing was going literally artist by artist, name by name, from Aaliyah to ZZ Top in the Rolling Stone Encyclopedia of Rock and Roll, and looking up every single artist gathering whatever lawsuits that there were that pertained to them and putting together this spreadsheet. And I ended up with about 1,500 entries in this spreadsheet. And I just had it. I didn't know what to do. And I showed one of my professors, and he was like, this is a little bit out there, but we have this organization here called the Center for Empirical Research in the Law that does legal data, empirical data and legal databases. That's what they do.
Perfect.
And he's like, this is out there, but they might just like this. And, he sent it to them, and they called me in for a meeting. And then we arranged that after I graduated from law school, before I did anything else, I spent a year building out this database. Now, don't get me wrong, I was making jack shit. I had, a little bit of a stipend from the center. I had a nonprofit stipend from the school, and that was it. And for about 9 months, what would have been the following school year, I worked on this database up through May of 2011. And in my head, I was going to finish it. It was going to get publicized. Rolling Stone was going to be like, oh my God, we want to do a book with you. I actually thought it was my way of avoiding being a lawyer.
Wow.
Because I was terrified of having to be one.
Right.
And so I thought it was my way of avoiding it, that I was going to be able to be this dude who writes about it and comments on it and has this database. And what happened was it came out, and like some people reached out to me, but it didn't do the thing I thought. It didn't lead me into getting a million job offers. It didn't lead me into, that ideal career. It did, however, get me those first few people. A guy named Pat Collins from a company called CSAC, which is one of the performing rights organizations in Nashville. He just hit me. I was like, I'm just intrigued, and flew me down to Nashville and just said, I just want to meet you. And on that trip, I met with a number of people that I looked up. And it's like kind of from that first trip that I can actually start to trace where I am now. Some of those connections that I made, some of those people that I met on that trip were really the beginning of where this all started.
What a cool lesson, right? Like you think that it's going to go a certain way, you put all this into it, and then that unexpected variable actually is what comes of it.
So there's this principle that I really believe in. It's called obliquity. And obliquity, there's an economist, John Kay, and he talks about it. And it's also kind of mirrored in some, I'm not an Eastern philosophy dude, but it's mirrored in this Eastern philosophy called Wu Wei, which is indirect action. That, say you want to make a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Well, that can't be your goal.
Right.
Your goal can't be to make a lot of money. Your goal has to be to make the best, whatever it is that you make.
Yeah.
And that's how the money comes in. So you can't just say, I want this thing, I'm looking at that, I want to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's got to be, I want to make the best widget. I want to be the best, this kind of professional.
Yeah.
And it's more about those indirect goals that lead you to those eventualities. And I really believe that kind of what got me here is a lot of that. A lot of just really focusing on doing a great job at the thing that I was doing.
Yeah.
Without necessarily, I don't even know if I even had an end goal a lot of the time.
Dude, I love that you say that though, because like the parallel that I have to that is like be, do, have, or have, do, be. Like the way that you like look at those things, it's like you want to have all this money, you want to have all this stuff. Well, that's at the bottom. Like you have to figure out what you want to be and what you want to do first.
I love that.
Yeah. That's like always my like way of looking at it, right? So it's like you are being this educated music attorney, right? You are doing practices of making this spreadsheet, making all of this database, learning law, and then through all of that, you have success later on. But that's like the product. That's the,
Yeah. Yeah. And, when I did the database, there were several reasons for doing it. One of them was I thought it'd bring me notoriety.
Yeah.
But the other one is I read about 2,500 or skimmed at least 2,500 lawsuits involving musicians.
Yeah.
I summarized those cases.
Yeah.
I organized them. I created a searchable database where you could look up, I want to look up just when a manager sues an artist for breach of contract, or when, an artist sues a label.
Yeah.
I went through and categorized them all and organized them all. And in the process, learned all those, ground floor things you have to learn to practice as a lawyer in the music industry.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if that was my intent. I'd love to pretend my intent was to educate myself on all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was. I don't remember, but it certainly had that result.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then that makes sense. It's like through all of that, now here you are even more accidentally qualified as the music attorney that you are now.
That's right.
So, okay, so then take me to, and apologize if I fast forward, but I have so many questions for you and all that. So take me to like starting your practice in like the year of like kind of just like, I don't know, like your first little bit of like, cool, you're a music attorney.
I don't know when I would say I actually became a music attorney.
Okay.
When I first came out of when I first finished the database and I didn't get inundated with jobs, I freaked the fuck out.
Yeah.
And I mean, I even like got down the road with a personal injury law firm because I was like, I'm a lawyer, I'm broke. I've been out for a year now working on this database, expecting it was going to do all these things. And so, I just didn't really know exactly what the future held for me, and was just trying to figure the next steps out. And I had some friends, I obviously knew musicians, so I was doing a lot of free legal work for people. None of them were really getting opportunities. Some of them were getting too old. I was just trying to connect with local artists. But a producer that I had worked with as an artist, who had moved out to LA and moved back to Chicago, who had done a lot of great work with labels like Epitaph, Fueled by Ramen, and Hopeless, and things like that in the world that I had grown up in, but keep in mind, had not been in for about 10 years at that point, that punk rock world. He came back to Chicago, and a buddy of mine told me about it, and I connected with him, and he became my first client. He's the one who introduced me to Johnny Minardi, and I'll just give a shout out to Johnny, who's been there with me from the very fucking beginning.
We gotta trust.
I mean, there's sometimes
that's how I know you.
Yeah, I mean, along the way, you find these people who believe in you at a time when you don't necessarily know that you deserve it. And even in retrospect, I don't know necessarily that certain people who believed in me at certain times were even justified in doing so at the time. Now, maybe time has proven them correct, but in the moment, I don't necessarily know that they were fully justified in it. But at the time, it was that one client. And I remember someone saying to me at that time, and this was not a music lawyer, but just a lawyer who had a really successful practice. The hardest thing is getting your first client. But I had already had my first client. I remember when they said that to me, that's like when I knew it was possible. I was like, okay, if the hardest thing is getting your first client, then I think I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
And from there, it's just grinding. Yeah. From there, it's just, putting in more work than you're being paid for. It's lying to people about how much time you're putting into it. Saying 5 hours when you spent 30 hours, you don't want to admit it because, you had to go learn all these things you didn't know.
Yeah,
so by the time you talk to them, you say, oh yeah, I looked over the contract. It looks good. Here's what's good. This part's okay. We should try to change this. What they don't know is you had to go learn all of that in the last 48 hours.
Holy.
And you barely slept because you just wanted to be able to knock it out of the park for them. It was just starting with that. I remember, that first fall of, this is like 2012, I think it was, when I had my first like 3 legit, a record deal, a distribution deal. It was 2 record deals and a distro deal. And all of them were super small time. But I remember handling those. And I remember saying to my wife, who has believed in me so much from day one and has put up through so much. But another shout out time for my wife for fucking believing in me. I mean, if you can tell, look, we're all lucky. Anyone who's succeeded in the music industry is lucky to have been believed in by people at key points in their life.
Actually,
and anyone who does not recognize that, don't fuck with them. If you ever talk to anybody who is not just over the moon with their gratitude to other people for what they've done, don't fuck with those people.
Yeah, there's something fishy about that person.
Because they're giving themselves credit. So getting back to that fall I was just talking about, I just remember that first fall of 2012 when I was handling those first few deals and saying to my wife, after I do these, I will be in a different place. I will have been a guy who has done these deals.
Yeah.
And it panned out. It was the truth. I finished those, and then look, they were small time, but they led to other small time deals. And then from there, it's just kind of trading up a little bit, getting a little bit bigger. By the next fall, that was when by then I was working with Fireworks. That was they kind of got me further into the punk rock world. The Hush Sound. It was
you worked with them?
Yeah, it was a blast. And right around then, my now law partner, who was at a big firm, has a partner at a big firm, who's a corporate guy at a big firm, decided to leave that behind to try to start this crazy shit with me. And we joined up and started our firm, Pierson Wells. He had been in a big firm and working with, Anheuser-Busch and big corporations, and was now with this little punk rock lawyer. And again, on that, I owe so much to him for that. But, after we started to have at least enough of each of us individually, enough of national clientele, enough stuff that was working okay, it just made sense to join up and start a firm. And again, it was still struggles for the next year. But each year I can pinpoint new areas of growth from that year, some big accomplishments that allowed us each year to always be bigger than the next year, always be getting bigger and better clients, bigger and better deals. bigger and better reputation. And at a certain point, your name is just out there. And at a certain point, you're someone that people know.
Yeah.
And, I feel like, that eventually, if you're good at what you do, again, you work hard at it, you're smart about it, you just keep at it and it just grows. And you have to have patience. You got to play the long game, but you get to the point where, those clients, that your practice becomes something that can feed itself in a way. The next round of artists, the next round of deals, it kind of comes out of the stuff that you're doing now. And it no longer is you're freaking out about when's the next deal going to come in, because they're just coming in. You're now someone that people recognize and will go to. You're the name that is circling around. And
so
yeah,
it's like since 2012, you did your first deals really well, took the pride, did the 5-hour deal that took 30, but made sure it was the perfect deal. And then it's like by doing that good work, 2012, like we're up to 8 years from that, of that progression and the constant hard work and then the delivering a good product. So it's not like it was an overnight thing.
No, absolutely not.
But
and I will still say, from 2012 to 2015, there's still, it's not like I was making a lot of money.
Yeah, you were surviving.
I was surviving. Yeah. I had a living.
Yeah.
I had a career.
Right.
But it wasn't a lot of money. I was a lower middle class lawyer.
Wow.
But I knew I was building towards something, and I enjoyed it.
And it's funny because like I probably met you around 2015.
Yeah, you probably met me when I was a little more comfortable.
Yeah,
I was definitely a little more comfortable at the time I met you.
It was still like, like we were doing deals with indies that like you were like, oh, this is exciting because it's the first time I get to look at this contract.
Yeah,
or like
right.
And I don't know. To this day, I still see you having that spark and that excitement, and it's cool to hear where that comes from. It's cool to hear that story because I've always kind of wondered that.
Yeah.
So thank you for that story.
Absolutely.
So the other part of this podcast and I'm specifically excited to ask you because I feel like it's rare to be able to have such like a cool, candid conversation with someone that knows as much as you do. And a lot of the people listening to this might be artists and people that are trying to get to a new level that might have questions that have never worked with an attorney or, like there's just a level, right? So I don't want to make it too broad, but for those listening who have yet to work with somebody as like a music attorney, what are some things like when do you know when to reach out? How do you reach out? Understanding deals these days, like all of the, if you could tell these things to the Loren that was playing in bands that didn't know.
Right. It's actually a really tough question because
it's pretty broad. I can get more specific, but if that gives you something.
Well, no, just the first thing is, when it's a bit of a catch-22.
Yeah.
As an artist and your relationship with lawyers. Because lawyers should be the first person on your team. They should be.
I like that.
Because the lawyer, and this is what differentiates a lawyer from everyone else on your team, a lawyer is bound by ethical rules that in order to maintain their license, they have to follow.
Yeah.
Conflicts of interest have to be disclosed to you. If they do not disclose conflicts of interest to you, they can lose their license. Yeah. Managers do not have that same problem. Record labels don't have that same problem. So lawyers should be the first person on your team because they are the only person on your team who will be bound by rules not to fuck you.
Yeah.
Now, not that lawyers don't ever fuck people,
right?
But they're not. They're bound by rules not to do so.
Yeah.
So it should be your first person on your team. Problem is, how do you get a lawyer on your team?
Yes.
And, this is where what I often say to a lot of bands, I always tell this story of, I spoke on a panel one time and someone came up to me from a local band and handed me their business card that they were the CEO of their band.
Incredible.
And I'm like, yeah, but are your songs good? Like, what is your band? Like, you're a CEO of what?
Yeah.
Right? And so really, when you first start out as an artist, just be a fucking artist. Just focus on your music. You will, when it's time that you need people on your team, it's because opportunities are coming to you. When opportunities are coming to you, those people will want to be on your team. But for a lot of artists, they get a little bit bogged down in trying to find these little things that make them feel professional and feel accomplished, but don't actually contribute to their growth, such as setting up an LLC and setting yourself as the CEO. I'm sure they were very proud of that. And I'm sure they felt that was a sign of maturity and professionalism. But if the music's no good, it doesn't fucking matter that you're a CEO. And so, for artists right now, if you have been playing in your town for a year and still no one's coming to your shows, stop and ask yourself why. The problem is not the shows. The problem is not the venue. The problem is not the fans. You have to stop and ask yourself, why is no one coming to our shows? Why are people not connecting to our music? Don't distract yourself by going and setting up an LLC and making yourself the CEO and someone else the COO, which is what I think bands do. They see lack of growth in some areas, and so then they fill that hole with stuff that makes them feel like they're more accomplished. But pay attention to the results of what you're doing. If people aren't coming to your shows, then stop and ask yourself, why are the people not coming to the shows? And do not answer anything other than something that has to do with what you are doing, because that's almost certainly what the issue is.
Preach. That was so well said.
Thank you. If you can,
so
I've said it to some people before.
That was dialed. That was great. So now, fast forward. That problem has been fixed. You're an artist and people are coming to you. You've perfected the product. People are starting to care. You're starting to get hit up. Maybe you're getting emails from managers, labels. Somebody's trying to put your songs out. Somebody wants to put your music on a channel. It's starting to feel real. Maybe you're making a little bit of money off of Spotify or, whatever. Then what?
By then, other artists who have lawyers.
Cool.
By the time that you're touring, you're part of the touring circuit. By the time you have significant numbers on Spotify, by the time you are within your local scene, one of the going concerns, I will guarantee you in your local scene, there are other artists that are signed. There are other artists that are bigger than you who have managers and who have lawyers. And at that point, you go to them and you say, who's your lawyer? Do you like your lawyer? What's your relationship with your lawyer? Find out about multiple lawyers if you can. Find out which one sounds like the best one, the one that's going to be, you'll connect with the best. But, don't, shooting in the dark is tough. Like, and frankly, if you don't have anything going on, then you don't really have need for a lawyer. If you have things going on, then you're not going to be operating in a vacuum. There is no music scene in this country where it's just one band, and that's the only one that has fans.
Yeah.
There's always a scene, and there's always some that are doing well. And, it can be competitive, between those bands. But those people are also the people who are going to give you great insight into what to do. Those are the people who are going to introduce you to managers and to agents and to lawyers and to record labels. Be one of those bands that other bands want to be friends with.
Don't be shitty to your peers.
Don't be shitty to your peers.
Yeah.
Because at that point, and I don't want to sound like I think I'm cool, but I don't want a fucking email from my website. I don't want you to find my website and then email me and just say hey, I found you online. I want you to come through someone that I know. At this point, unless you're referred to me by somebody that I know, I don't answer my phone if I don't recognize the number or I'm not expecting the call.
Right.
I'll let it go to voicemail and I'll check it. And I need to call that person back. If it's some band that I don't know, I might go look them up on Spotify. And if they have shit numbers,
right. But if you get that referral, it holds so much more weight. And
a band with shit numbers that comes in through a buddy of mine, that I will pay attention to.
Yeah. And the only way you're going to get that is if you're good to your people and if you've earned that.
Yeah.
Cool. So continuing down this because I love it. So you're at that spot, you're getting the referrals. So my next two questions, you have the option of a couple lawyers. How do you know who's good and who's not?
Well, unfortunately, you don't.
Okay.
To be honest, you don't. You can just go based on reputation. There's a problem where you can go based on who their clientele is, but there are some lawyers that I know out there who have some decent artists that I wouldn't recommend. Say that someone came to me and I couldn't represent them for some reason, and I had to pick another lawyer to refer them to. There are some lawyers I know who have some great artists that I would not refer people to for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
So how do you pick who to work with? You go with the one that you vibe with the best, the one who you think gets you the most. And I always kind of say that in a lot of relationships that become meaningful, there's this moment where they say this one thing and you go, oh, just this one thing that they say in one conversation. You're like, that's my guy.
I love that.
That's the one. And so you kind of wait for that moment. There should be something where there's some connection point, some access point where after that, you're like, okay, I had a great moment with that one. And if you have a great moment with multiple people, from there, I don't know, I guess you just got to pick one.
Yeah.
Truth is, music lawyers should know, if they're accomplished, they should know all the same things.
Yeah. So then if you have a good connection and
one thing I will say though, this is a definite is, genres are different.
Oh,
And deals are
Cool.
different in different genres.
Yeah.
The way that record labels operate will be different among different genres. Deals are not like, the fundamental record deal is the same
Yeah.
across all genres with some limited exceptions. But there are different practices among the different genres. And so, if you are a hip hop artist, maybe a lawyer who does only metal or mostly metal wouldn't be the best.
Right.
And the same thing with vice versa. And also because so much of what we do involve, like, once you know the record labels well, the people who are running the labels, their lawyers, the A&R people, then you can do a lot more for your artist at that point. So it is good to find a lawyer who is in a similar pocket as you. Now, I would caution you against finding a lawyer who is solely in your pocket. One of the things that I always like to say to clients, potential clients that I'm talking to, I mention the fact that our roster encompasses stuff like Chuck Berry, stuff like Big Frida,
Yeah.
but also Fit for an Autopsy.
Yeah.
Also, the death metal and all of that stuff. I like that variety because we have everything from mainstream hip hop to New Orleans bounce to classic rock, and I do believe that gives us a broad perspective on how not just a specific deal fits within its genre, but how the genre fits within the industry, how the deal fits within the industry.
Yeah.
And from there, you can kind of triangulate the deal a little bit better.
That's amazing. And I'll jump in just real quick to say, like, to your point, in finding like somebody that you jive with, like, you and I got along so well, right? And you've done so many of the deals for my artists, because I think another thing to add to that is, like, you have to think, when you get to this point, people are people. Like, if you're starting to get to these professional relationships, you're going to be talking to these people a lot. Right. So you want to work with somebody that you like and that you can have fun on the phone with and vibe with, because there's going to be a lot of that time. And then the other thing is a credit to what you were saying about knowing different labels and deals. As you and I have now had the opportunity to work in different genres, it has been really helpful that, we'll look at a certain indie deal and we'll look at a certain duration, and it's like, oh, cool, interesting. Like, they want publishing here, or they want this many albums. This is the budget. That's funny that this label offered this much more money, but they're prioritizing this. So it is cool that you have that experience. I guess, that's just you having the time in. That's you being down to have done it all, because now you have the contrast of all of them.
Yeah. And on that topic, because you and I, have had great conversations, about shared clients, just about life in general as well.
Yeah.
But, if you got a lawyer who's not answering your fucking calls, get rid of him.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing. Like, a lot of people, they get kind of starstruck by some lawyers and their clientele, and then they will put up with that lawyer ignoring them, not answering them, or treating them kind of shitty when they're on the phone, talking down to them, and don't deal with that.
Yeah.
Don't deal with that. One thing that I always want artists who are listening to this to remember is that you are the ones with talent.
Yeah.
You are the reason why all of this industry exists. These people are lucky to work with you, not the other way around. Now, they can help you a lot. Lawyers can help artists a lot. Lawyers are very valuable. The right lawyers in the right situation can do the right shit for you. But this industry exists because of you, the one with talent. It's not because of me.
Yeah.
And on top of that, when I am your lawyer, you are my boss. And I work for you, right? If I'm not answering your calls, if I'm not treating you with respect, then do not work with me. And I shouldn't say that from a first person perspective, because I would like to think that's not me.
But just as the example.
As the example. Just never forget that.
That's beautiful. So then the other part, the thing that I was going to get to, which you kind of touched on, is, okay, you found your right lawyer, you found your team, you figured that out, you're relevant enough that people care. Now record labels are paying attention to you. How do you negotiate and navigate what is a good deal?
That is, I feel like every question that you've asked me, I always have this, well, that's not an easy answer. Because of course, I guess nothing is.
No. And again, it's like, these are very broad questions, and people do have these specific, it's not going to be perfect because everything is a little bit different. But I remember you, like, the reason I asked that question is you were kind of telling me about like A and B almost of like, so maybe just touch on that.
Yeah, no, of course. So, one thing I will say, again, having a lawyer who's experienced with your genre and knows a little bit about the expectations within the specific labels, that can certainly be helpful for you to just kind of put it in a category. How does this compare to what else is out there? What do other deals look like? But even if you get a totally standard offer from a label within your genre, and it just might not be right for you, you might say, no, I don't want to do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, listen to your lawyer, listen to your manager about what your expectations should be. I always feel like,
oh, cool.
Sometimes my job is managing expectations.
Yeah.
I meet an artist who is, a developing indie rock band, and their whole thing is we just want to keep our masters and sign a 1-record deal. And I always be like, look, those deals do exist. I do those deals. I call them the magical deals that I don't want most of my clients to know about. They do exist, and there are some wonderful deals out there that you can get that don't even seem real. But make sure that you, for me, what I have to do is manage expectations a lot of the times, make sure that they understand like how a deal fits within their genre, how a deal fits for an artist of their size, and what those expectations should be.
Because you'd have to have a heck of a lot of leverage to get a deal like that.
Yeah, and
which maybe even comes back to the first point you said of like, if you're good enough that people are paying attention to you and your product, like the better you are when you get to the point of needing the help and the labels are coming to you, you probably have more leverage. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, no, and that's what, we talked about a little bit before the podcast is, we're at a really interesting time in the music business where you can do stuff on your own now. And that was the promise of the digital era for the last 20 years that did not manifest itself in reality until the last 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So people have been saying, you control your own career, like direct to the consumer. Well, first of all, it's not direct to consumer. You're using fucking Spotify for one. Spotify, keep in mind, is a pretty large corporation. So it's not like you're going direct to the consumer.
Yeah.
You're using huge aggregators to get to them, right? So don't fool yourself. But there was this promise of the digital era that artists were going to be able to take back the control. But the truth is, that has not happened. The fact of the matter is, the major labels still distribute 85% of the music.
Is it 85?
It's 85%,
wow.
Which is actually higher than it was in the 90s when it was around 80%.
Funny.
So the digital era, there was this promise that everything's going to be different. You're going to be able to command your own deals. You're going to be able to state your own terms. And for most of the time, that was incorrect. Nowadays, it kind of is. It's more correct now. And so I always kind of say now there's column A and column B. Column A is the traditional sort of deal that still exists. A lot of artists, most artists are still signing those, might be 3 records, might be 2, might be as much as 4. If it's a major label deal, you're looking at 5 if you're a new artist that doesn't have crazy, stupid leverage. There is that category, what I column A.
Yeah.
The old school record deal still exists most of the time. But nowadays there's column B. And column B is those artists who just, for whatever, they've built up the leverage on their own. They got crazy numbers on Spotify. They got crazy fans. They got great interactions on Instagram. They're all of the other shit that I don't even get into because I'm too old for it. But
they're ripping on TikTok. They're all the relevant things.
Yeah, they're doing all that stuff. Those artists now can sometimes get these crazy, stupid deals, and I've done enough of these to know that they exist and try to not let them influence the way I see the standard deals when that's what's right for an artist. But these column B deals, they're, sometimes you're keeping your masters, maybe even, I did one recently. It was a significant amount of money for a 5-year license and then 1 record on a 5-year license.
Sick.
And the money on that one for an indie, and it was an independent label. And, it's one of those deals that, again, I don't want everyone in column A to expect that because they're not going to be able to get that. That artist had incredible numbers. That artist had been touring like crazy. That artist had great leverage and was in a position to be able to get that sort of a deal.
Yeah.
Now, most artists can't get there. And, a lot of artists are still signing those column A deals. And again, I believe in record labels.
Yeah.
I am not one of those people that thinks that record labels will ever no longer be relevant.
Yeah.
Never. They will always be valuable.
Yeah.
And the people that I know at record labels, they are in it because they love music, because they love the artists that they work for. They want to make those artists succeed. And there's been a lot of negativity around record labels forever in the music press. But another thing I would say is just a piece of advice is take the music press with a grain of salt. I always say this, music journalists don't get paid to be right. They get paid to write. And that's a big difference. Why do you get paid to write? Because people are reading what you write, which means you're writing what people want to read, which means you're not writing what's right. You're writing what's read. All right. And so don't listen to a lot of those people. Talk to the managers, talk to the agents, talk to the lawyers. Those are the ones who are going to be able to give you a more realistic perspective about what to expect, what kind of deal you should expect, what to hold out for, what not to hold out for. Those are the ones.
Well, I was just going to say, we say hold out for, not hold out for. Like I was going to say, when you break it down and like compare deals like that, you know, maybe you're at a spot as an artist where you really feel like you've hit your ceiling of what you can do on your own, and you're starting to get those traditional type deals coming to you. Maybe that's the move, because without that, you won't get any further. And with that deal, it's like, cool, you're signing away a little bit more rights for a longer time, whatever. But you're also getting now a label that cares about you, that has you for 3 or 4 albums,
and
or
we'll be
whatever,
paying for everything for you,
and will be in both vested interest of grow this artist. And then after that term, maybe you're bigger and you have more leverage. So maybe that's the perfect thing. Or maybe you're at a spot in your career where things are going so well that you feel like you have a little bit more gas before you do need a label, and you can keep going on your own. And then maybe that like the newer column B deal does apply to you, and you think that you can really get there.
Yeah, I think you have to pay attention to your momentum, and when your momentum feels like it is peaking.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there is and this is something I say a lot. A lot of musicians live under the fallacy that what got me here will get me there. So I have done X, Y, and Z, and I've gotten to this position where I have these fans and I have this level of success. So therefore, I have to keep doing what I'm doing, and it will keep getting bigger. The analogy that I draw is a climbing wall. I took my kids to a climbing wall not long ago, and there's one, it goes straight up for a little while, and then it starts curving out toward, out, and now all of a sudden,
like it's like a reverse incline, like you're dangling.
So like the skills, the muscle groups, the ability that gets you up to that point where it starts curving out are not the same skills, not the same muscle groups, not the same know-how that's going to allow you to then climb up the rest of that fucking inverted whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so you cannot assume what got me here will get me there. And you have to, and not that it will never, but you cannot naturally assume that. It is often an entirely different skill set that takes you from that peak you were able to reach on your own to that peak that you can actually reach. And that skill set is often shit that A, you don't know how to do.
Yeah.
And B, you shouldn't be spending your time on because it is your job to be a talented musician.
Right. Yeah, because you can get caught up in the wrong thing then and spend all of the too much time where you could be creating and you could be doing all of the things as an artist and a musician, getting obsessed with the business and like... Yeah, like I really like the way you put that, because I think that you're right that people paint the picture of teams or managers, labels, industry being a bad thing, where it's like if you find the right ones, they're there to help, and they know their strengths, and they know that they're not artists, and they have these skills that are not being an artist that are very helpful to an artist.
Yeah, there's this idea in economics, specialization. And the analogy that you always draw, and it's perfect for the music business. Let's say there's 3 people live right next to each other, 3 neighbors. One of them makes phenomenal bread. Okay baskets, and pretty shitty but workable wagons. The next one makes okay bread, phenomenal baskets, and maybe that one, or maybe okay, wagons again.
Yeah.
The last one makes phenomenal wagons, okay bread. You get what I'm saying? Like, and each of them can make all 3 if they want. Each of them can make their own wagons, their own bread, and their own baskets, make their bread and take them to all the townspeople and fucking, Or one of them can say, hey, I make great baskets, you make great bread, and you make great wagons. Why don't I make the bread, you make the baskets, and he'll make the wagons. And now we're going to be having great product, getting there quickly, and it's going to work better for all of us. And a lot of artists, they say, well, I can make my own baskets, I can make my own wagons. Well, you should be making the bread.
Yeah.
And not always. Again, there's always exceptions to all of these rules. But, I always feel like that's really, really poignant in the music industry. And a lot of artists, they don't necessarily see it that way.
That is so well put. Again, a great analogy. And it just like, it takes something, what feels so complicated, and it makes it so simple, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's always going to be specific to the artist and the situation. But I think that if you take a step back and look at it, and you're honest and humble enough to be like, damn, maybe somebody could be helping me with this, or maybe it's time, or maybe it's not time. Maybe I think I'm over here needing this, and I just need to make better bread right now.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So that's awesome. I feel like we could talk for literally forever on this. And I try to keep these around an hour just because I feel like that's about as much time as people have to listen to podcasts. I also feel like there could be like a Loren and talk about very specific subjects, because you're so knowledgeable and so well spoken on this. But before we do end it, did I miss anything in your story? Is there anything like really important, or anything that you did want to add to it, just because this has been so freaking incredible?
Man, the big open-ended
Yeah,
it's funny because whenever I host a panel or something like that, I always end with, "Is there any general piece of advice?"
And
you would
now
like
here
to
you
give?
are, sucker.
And here I am, stuck in it. In that position. Here's the thing that I think I would say, and this is to artists, but not just artists, to everyone. The music industry is succeeding in the music industry is walking a very fine line between believing in your own myths, which you have to be audacious enough to even try this shit.
Yeah.
But also self-awareness. Being self-aware to recognize where your failings are, self-aware to recognize what is working and what is not working, self-aware enough to just say, like for me, when I first started as a lawyer, I wanted to be doing pop stuff right out the gate. Why did I end up in punk rock out the gate? It was because that's what was working. That's where I had the first few connections, and I just followed my momentum, And so I always feel like whatever role you're in, one of the most important things you have to do is just maintain that balance. You have to be audacious enough to believe in yourself, despite the fact that what you're attempting is almost mathematically impossible. But at the same time, you have to be self-aware enough to recognize that within that, you need to be able to stop and say, this is working, this isn't working. I can do all this crazy shit, but I have to do it in the real world. And that second aspect is you got to bring yourself down to the real world. Believe in yourself, and believe in yourself in an unrealistic way, because you have to, but at the same time, temper it with reality.
Do you want to take that off and drop the mic? That was
How
really,
expensive
really
is
good.
it? I don't want to break it.
It's not that bad. Dude, that's amazing. That truly, thank you for that. That was so
Absolutely.
well said. And again, I don't really know, as far as this podcast goes, it's the first thing is I love telling the stories, but as I've had the privilege to have these insanely qualified guests with so much knowledge, like the idea of doing something more specific, right? And coming and talking about just a specific subject, or maybe your stand-up career.
That'll be a short one.
I think that's really cool, and I hope to do more of that as well. So if anybody is listening to this one and just was in it and needs more from you, please let us know, because I would love to know how we could, continue telling and helping more people. If anybody wants to find you, social media or whatever, where can people find you?
So I would just go to our firm's website, which is Pierson Wells, PiersonWells.com. We're all up. All three of us are up there. All of our email addresses are up there. Just find me there. Email me. I'd reference this podcast in your subject line, because that's going to make me look at it.
Yeah, good call. Maybe you don't have the band referral, but at least you got the podcast referral.
Right.
You're one step above the blind email.
Then I got to say, it's just to you, Cram, it's awesome that you're doing this, and it's a service that a lot of people need. I wish that when I was a young artist, a young musician, something like this could have existed. And there would have been people like you who are out there trying to help people like me back then know what to do. You can see I'm tearing up a little bit, dude. I hope you can see that. Because it's real, man. It's real. And this is a service, and that these kids really, you kids out there, people, I say kids all the time, but I'm 38. So if you're under 30, I can call you a kid. This is really valuable and really, really helpful for people.
You just hit the nail so perfectly on the head of what I'm going for. I remember my early days, 18 years old, being told oh, you're the tour manager now, and not knowing what that was, and wishing that there was a resource where I could learn. And it's I luckily have the access to these brilliant people like yourself, and I know that not everybody does. And it's that's all I want to do. I just want to spread that, because it's the more people are educated, the more people know the right people and the right ways to do things, the industry gets better for everyone.
Yep.
There's so much room for success. We were saying, we're at this renaissance of music. Everyone can succeed. So let's make it better. Let's make people smarter. Let's do it with better etiquette. So thank you for adding to that. Thank you for understanding what I'm trying to do. Holy shit.
And if there's one last thing that I want to say, is to the people who are listening, to pay it forward.
Yo. Yes. I could not agree with that more. Yeah.
We're all here because of the people who helped us at the right time.
Like you were saying, those the times where you're lucky, where that person believes in you, where they shouldn't have.
Absolutely.
Pay that forward. Keep it going.
Fuck yeah, dude.
Dude, thank you.